Hello and welcome to the Squared Circle Psychobabble. My name is Michael Valenti, and joining us via Skype tonight is my brother Ralph, the co-host of the Squared Circle Psychobabble. Thank you all for watching and listening to the Squared Circle Psychobabble. And tonight, again, some big news revolving someone in WWE possibly going to All Elite Wrestling. This time we're talking about the Beast Incarnate, Brock Lesnar. Dave Meltzer on Wrestling Observer Radio saying that the Beast has options, and Paul Heyman will be negotiating with both WWE and UFC, along with All Elite Wrestling. So we'll get to the conversation, but before we do, make sure you hit subscribe and hit that bell for notifications, as we're trying to get to 5,000 YouTube subscribers before All Elite Wrestling, Double or Nothing. Ralph, what do you make of the news of Dave Meltzer with this?
Well, I'd like to think with this, it's probably one of those situations where, things may be getting a little overblown. I certainly wouldn't get ahead of myself, but I certainly could see this actually happening at some point. One of the things that you'll know about Brock Lesnar, or that we've learned about Brock Lesnar, is if the money's right, he's willing to do it, right? If they're willing to pay him, whether it's the UFC, the WWE, hell, the NFL, he's willing to do things outside of WWE if they're willing to pay the money. So I don't know. I mean, could this actually happen? Maybe. Is All Elite Wrestling willing to put up the type of contract that would lure Brock Lesnar away from WWE? I don't know. I don't know if that's actually going to end up happening, if it will come to fruition. But you know what? Again, it just makes things fun and exciting within the wrestling industry once again.
One thing that we have to realize here, Ralph, is that with all the other people rumored to be going to All Elite Wrestling, you have Dean Ambrose, Dolph Ziggler, The Revival, all frustrated with how they're booked. Brock Lesnar, on the other hand, is a different commodity. Brock Lesnar has probably been booked the strongest in WWE for the last 4 or 5 years. Now, what makes sense? Like, why would Brock Lesnar go to All Elite Wrestling? Is there any reason he would go?
Yeah, I mean, certainly I would think if the money's right, he'd be willing to make the jump. Like we've always known about him, he does have an advocate in Paul Heyman. He is negotiating, like you said, with the UFC, potentially considering a jump to All Elite, or at least the speculation is that he could potentially jump to All Elite Wrestling. So I don't know. I think it's just one of those things. If they're willing to make a big offer for a big name guy like Lesnar, he might go where the money is. Doesn't necessarily mean he'll be given, all the attention or be the main guy there. He could even work a lighter schedule than he's already working in WWE, and that could potentially work to All Elite Wrestling's in their favor. Because they have these guys that are kind of within these contracts where they don't have to just be exclusive to All Elite Wrestling. So, Brock kind of has that right now with the WWE, where he's only obligated a certain amount of dates. Maybe it's more money for less dates. That could be one of the reasons why he goes there.
Now, the other thing that obviously sparked this whole speculation to begin with is the fact that Chris Jericho tweeted during the Royal Rumble and was jabbing at Brock Lesnar, basically saying that he's overweight, talking about his gut and pulling his pants up. And I guess Meltzer was also pointing out he was doing similar things to this, teasing the Kenny Omega match that they had at Wrestle Kingdom 12 in 2017. Those tweets have been since deleted, but do you think there's anything to hold water here as far as Jericho?
I think it's smart on Chris Jericho's behalf, because look at what we're doing right now. Look at what the wrestling, community was doing all day today. The speculation began that, with Brock Lesnar's contract coming up, that they could be making a bid at him, and the first person that you think about is a guy who's already contractually obligated to All Elite Wrestling in Chris Jericho. So, like we've always pointed out with All Elite Wrestling, we don't even know if they own a wrestling ring to this point. They've put on 0 shows to date, but somehow we keep ending up talking about them. So whether it's these press conferences or another guy like Chris Jericho poking fun at Brock Lesnar, they are figuring out ways to remain relevant and remain in the limelight even when they haven't even put on a show yet. And we're here talking about Chris Jericho versus Brock Lesnar. So whether it's just for attention or where there's smoke, there's fire, I'm not sure. Only time's going to tell. But he knows exactly what he's doing, and he's very smart for doing this.
Now, the other thing too is like you said, they are keeping themselves relevant in All Elite Wrestling, doing everything they can.
Yeah.
And, we have this ticket sale thing happening next week in Las Vegas where they're going to give the information out with All Elite Wrestling. And they sent out the press release Thursday where we'll know more signings in All Elite Wrestling. We'll know the ticket information. We'll know some partnerships in All Elite Wrestling and a special surprise. And obviously those that saw the special surprise most likely will be Kenny Omega. If Lesnar does do something with All Elite Wrestling, do you see just a one-off against Jericho, or do you see more where we could potentially see Lesnar versus Omega?
All right, so certainly I think if he's going to do one-off match, a guy like Chris Jericho, certainly a high-profile guy within the wrestling industry. Brock Lesnar being one of the top guys, if not the top guy within WWE within the last however many years. I think right now that's probably the match to make if he does end up going there. However, you can't help but wonder, okay, well, if Kenny Omega in fact goes to All Elite Wrestling, you got to imagine that's one of the matches that's right at the top of the list, because I know that's certainly a match that I'd like to see. I mean, we always talk about what Brock Lesnar brings to the table, especially when he's in there with a smaller guy like, Finn Balor, AJ Styles, a guy that can really work around his strengths. So imagine him in the ring with a guy like Kenny Omega. I think it would be an amazing match. So those are the two matches that I would most look forward to.
It probably would be a great match, but the other question you got to ask yourself is, would people want it? I know you want it. I wouldn't mind seeing Lesnar versus Omega. Even Lesnar versus Jericho would be a good match if we actually do see, because what they're saying about the contract with Brock Lesnar is he has WrestleMania and possibly the Saudi Arabia show happening in late April, early May. And then he's done with WWE for now. Yep. Do you see, instead of All Elite Wrestling and instead of WWE, he goes back to the UFC?
Well, I think no matter where he goes, that's going to be one of the options that's open to him. I think within whatever contract, whatever he has left with WWE, it's within his contract that he can still go fight in the UFC. And I'd imagine if he were to go to All Elite Wrestling and require the same thing or ask them for the same thing. So even if he did end up going under contract with All Elite Wrestling, whether it's for a long-term deal or a couple of appearances, I'm sure that he would want it written somewhere that he can go and participate in the UFC.
Now, the one thing we have to know here is he's not getting any younger. He's, in his early 40s.
Yep.
Maybe he just doesn't want to do any of it. We saw what happened on the 24 episode where they were doing the stuff with WrestleMania 34, and he threw the belt at Vince, whether or not that was just for the cameras or there was legit heat with Vince McMahon that night.
Yep.
Maybe he's just frustrated like everybody else, and he just doesn't want to be a part of wrestling anymore. And, he doesn't need the money. He doesn't need the proper booking like some guys do. He could be done. This could be, WrestleMania 35 could be his last match ever. What do you think of that?
He certainly could be. I got to think, though, if I'm Vince McMahon, look, from everything we've heard about All Elite Wrestling and everything that's kind of been speculated, is anybody who seems somewhat disgruntled with the WWE and the direction of their character, it's kind of assumed automatically, whether they're right or wrong, that they're going to go to All Elite Wrestling. The point I want to make with that would be, if you're Vince McMahon, you're kind of in between a rock and a hard place, because you've spent all this time and effort investing in creating this character like Brock Lesnar. He's beat the likes of The Undertaker. We saw him capture the streak, right? He conquered the streak there. He's beaten Roman Reigns multiple times. He's beaten Braun Strowman. He's beaten Seth Rollins. He's beaten AJ Styles. He's beaten Daniel Bryan, Finn Balor, all your top guys. So if you're Vince McMahon and if you're Brock Lesnar, you're smart for doing this. You know that Vince McMahon is going to have to pay you top dollar, way more than probably he was willing to pay, especially now that All Elite Wrestling is on the table. Had All Elite Wrestling not been in the picture, Could he go participate in Ring of Honor or New Japan? He can, but would it really be that big of a deal? I mean, he's already participated in New Japan before, Ring of Honor, or even Impact for that matter. I don't think, would it be a big deal? Sure, but they don't quite have the momentum right now like All Elite Wrestling. So if you're Brock Lesnar, one, you're going to get paid by Vince McMahon or All Elite Wrestling. On the other side of that now is you have a growing fan base who is extremely disgruntled with Brock Lesnar continuously being this part-time champion. So it's kind of like, okay, do you let him walk away and potentially sign with All Elite Wrestling? You might have to risk that in return of making your fan base happy, but then you're allowing one of your top guys that's essentially beat every single person on your roster, all your top guys, go to your rival promotion or up-and-coming promotion. So I think the pressure's on Vince McMahon to make a very, very difficult decision right now. And it's definitely a spot I wouldn't want to be in. You either pay the guy or let him walk. And I don't know if Vince McMahon's really going to be willing to let him walk after they've invested so much time and effort into him.
Maybe the question we need to ask is if WWE even needs Brock Lesnar right now, because to me, what I saw this past weekend and on the first Raw and SmackDown after the Royal Rumble, WWE is kind of finally going and investing in their future. Let's, take a look here. Look at the Royal Rumble on the women's side. You have 6 women from NXT or NXT UK, including Rhea Ripley, who had 3 eliminations, second most in the women's Rumble match, and no legends. None. No legends whatsoever in the women's Royal Rumble. Now let's look at the men's Royal Rumble. We had 3 from NXT and 3 from NXT and NXT UK. Gargano, Black, and Pete Dunne. And we even had Johnny Gargano eliminate a former WWE champion. On the next night on Raw, we have Seth Rollins, who won the Royal Rumble, being basically coronated as the guy, the one in WWE. And on SmackDown, we're seeing Andrade Cien Almas. We're seeing Heavy Machinery looking really strong in that tag team match. We're seeing Mustafa Ali getting put into a WWE Championship match in the Elimination Chamber. They are finally investing in their future. So now the question really should be not whether or not Lesnar's a draw, but does WWE, for what they're trying to do they need Brock Lesnar?
I don't think they need Brock Lesnar. I think they have more than enough talent to really be producing good quality television on a weekly basis. They have more than enough guys that they can build with. The problem I have with it is, like I said, you've invested so much time in creating this character of Brock Lesnar. He beat everybody there is to beat. So if he goes to All Elite Wrestling, especially if Paul Heyman goes with him, I don't know what Paul Heyman's contract is like right now, if he'd be able to go with him. But imagine the type of promos he'd be able to cut, saying that he was already at WWE. He beat everybody there is to beat over there. And now he's at All Elite Wrestling to prove that he's elite or whatever, It's just a tough spot for the WWE to be in. Granted, you can let Seth Rollins beat him and take the title, but he always will have that. He always has that credibility to his link to his name, where he conquered the streak. He's beaten The Undertaker at WrestleMania. He's beaten the who's who of the WWE, all their top guys. So you can't really take that away from him. So it's a very tough spot that the WWE is in right now.
Now, let's move on a little bit, because you didn't really talk. You weren't on our last episode,
sure,
where we talked about Dean Ambrose.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is someone that Brock Lesnar has faced at a WrestleMania, and it wasn't a great performance in that WrestleMania, but one of the reasons why maybe Dean Ambrose is frustrated right now.
Yep.
Let's just get your thoughts on Dean Ambrose, and could we be seeing him in All Elite Wrestling?
Yeah, and again, it's weird because it seems like anytime news breaks that somebody's disgruntled with either creative or their contract or anything, and this guy wants his release, it's just kind of assumed that they're going to go to All Elite Wrestling. Now, can I see him doing that? Of course I can see him doing that. Do I ultimately see him doing that? I'm kind of up in the air. I'm still not fully convinced this is a real thing. It's either one of two things. It's one, WWE playing their cards right, knowing that All Elite Wrestling is going to be a legitimate thing and some type of competition down the road, and they don't want to burn their bridges with a guy like Dean Ambrose, because we kind of saw how that played out with CM Punk, essentially CM Punk wants nothing to do with the company and he's still a big name outside of WWE, or this is all just a work. And I'm not convinced that this is anything other than a work yet, especially given what we saw on Monday Night Raw with the interaction between Dean Ambrose and Triple H. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now. I haven't made up my mind what's going to happen. I can't tell if it's legitimate or some type of work, but again, let the speculation begin.
Now, April 8th, that's the Raw after WrestleMania.
Yeah.
Do we see Brock and or Dean Ambrose on that episode?
I'm gonna say, just based on what we've been told, I don't, whether this is a work or not with Dean Ambrose, I'm gonna say we don't see either of them. One, if it is a work with Dean Ambrose, I think they're trying to actually blur the lines between what's real and what's kind of staged for once, which I think they could do this a lot more than they actually do. Brock, I actually don't think we're going to see him the night after Raw. I think that we're going to get Seth Rollins beating him at WrestleMania, ultimately winning the championship, and then we won't see Brock for quite some time. Or maybe, like you said, he might perform in May in Saudi Arabia, and that might be the last we see of him in WWE.
Final thought here.
Yep.
All Elite Wrestling, will we see either one of these two there at some point in 2019?
2019, I think there's a good chance we actually see one of the two. I think
Which one?
I think it's more likely you see Dean Ambrose. The only reason I say that is, again, that Brock Lesnar, for all the stuff people say about him, he is the cash cow. He's the guy that they've really invested so much time and effort in. Dean Ambrose, while I like Dean Ambrose, if they let him walk, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but they still really need like a top guy. And you can have that with a Seth Rollins as a babyface, but when you kind of look at the lay of the land, especially on Monday Night Raw now, kind of few and far between, especially with Roman being a part-time guy. Not that he's a heel, but he was the other guy that they really cashed in big on. John Cena's kind of part-time. You need characters. You need guys that are going to push the needle, and you need guys that are recognizable and can put on good performances. And, you know, Brock is kind of hit or miss, but when he's in there with the right guy, it's great. So I think that it's more likely we see Dean Ambrose and not so much Brock Lesnar.
Personally, I don't think either one of them end up in All Elite Wrestling. I still think, like, releasing that statement on Tuesday, yes, I could see how they're being preventive, but at the same time, I could easily see this being part of a storyline. Absolutely. And very, very much being CM Punk-esque in 2011, where they're using the contract as part of the storyline.
Sure.
So until I see otherwise, here's how I'll know if this is a shoot or work. If there's any mention of him leaving on Monday, it's a work. If he is on TV and it's just status quo, then this is real.
Yeah.
If he is in fact leaving WWE, I think he's going more the lines of what CM Punk did and just disappear from the wrestling industry.
Yeah.
Lesnar, one thing about this whole thing, and everybody speculating that Lesnar is going to go to All Elite Wrestling if he leaves WWE, this would be totally against what AEW stands for. They are building their roster with unknown independent guys from the likes of Bar Wrestling, Defy Wrestling, Northeast Wrestling. I know they're possibly invading another promotion in Atlanta and another one in, I think, Ohio in a couple weeks. So I don't see Brock Lesnar being a part of that. And honestly, I don't even think there's really interest. I mean, sure, they might talk to him. And obviously he would be a draw. Don't get me wrong. So in that case, yes, who wouldn't want to at least talk to the guy? But at the end of the day, he's not what AEW stands for. Yeah,
I mean, I get that. I certainly think that, you know, a couple of big name guys is kind of what they need as well. You know, they've already got Chris Jericho, which, again, I think that Chris Jericho signing was massive because it kind of set a precedent that, okay, well, this is a legitimate thing. Not that Cody and the Young Bucks couldn't do it by themselves, but that was kind of like the cherry on top of the sundae, so to speak. At least at the time, what was going on then. from everything that's kind of speculated, Kenny Omega will be there as well. Adding a guy like Dean Ambrose, while he's not the top guy in WWE, it certainly helps build credibility. And I'm sorry, people may not like Brock Lesnar, but him carrying that much credibility over from WWE to All Elite Wrestling, they're smart businessmen, and Vince McMahon's a smart businessman.
Yep.
That's why they understand the potential drawing power of Brock Lesnar. And when you talk about wrestling, I say this all the time, one of the most important things in professional wrestling is getting human emotion. Some people really hate Brock Lesnar. Some people really like him. But you know what? When you watch one of his matches, you're invested in it. And that's the biggest thing for a fan. You want to be invested in a match. So if they're looking to add credibility and to bring a face to their product that has a lot of credibility and, get people invested, whether you want to see him win or lose, you look no further than Brock Lesnar. I mean, he brings all those things to the table. So it's going to be interesting. It's been fun speculating all of these things and hearing all of the rumors. And, it's made wrestling fun again outside of just watching WWE programming.
Yeah, it definitely has. And I'm sure this isn't the last that we'll hear from some WWE wrestler wanting to leave, and then the rumors start that he's going to All Elite Wrestling. We still have 3 more months before Double or Nothing. You have a final thought here?
Final thought, if he doesn't go, if neither of these guys go to All Elite Wrestling, you know what we'll be saying?
Damn dirt sheets?
Those damn dirt sheets.
Well, thank you for Skyping in and getting this episode in. What do you guys think? Will we see either Brock Lesnar or Dean Ambrose in All Elite Wrestling? Let us know in the comments below. If you liked any of our points, make sure you like this video, share this video, and share the episode if you're listening on your favorite podcast provider. Subscribe, as we're trying to get to 5,000 YouTube subscribers before All Elite Wrestling Double or Nothing, with new episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on the Squared Circle Psychobabble.